Welcome back. You're watching The Globe. A recent report by Stats SA reveals that nearly half of the children who experience violence in schools live in Eastern Cape, Free State, KwaZulu-Natal and the North West. The report, titled Children Exposed to Maltreatment 2021, shows that a higher percentage of children across the country reported being the subject of corporal punishment by a teacher between 2009 and 2019. The report says that the most common act of violence experienced by pupils was verbal abuse by teachers, which could take the form of insults, teasing and harassment. The third most common type suffered was physical violence by teachers. The report indicates that despite the abolishment of corporal punishment in South African schools in 1997, it is still used as a form of discipline. Well, for more on this, we're now joined by Stats SA Chief Director for Social Statistics, Solly Molayi. Thank you so much indeed for joining us and welcome.
Good evening to the viewers and good evening to yourself, Peter.
These are pretty sobering statistics. Let's start at the beginning. How do you collect these stats, this information? Because they are telling us a disturbing story.
Okay. Thank you so much, Peter. So Stats SA is responsible for collecting household surveys. So we go to the household and we ask questions around a variety of issues. So one of the issues that we are more interested in is issues around child statistics and also education. So what we have done with this report, as you have already explained in your intro, is that we went back to our data sets that we've been collecting for the past 20 years or so and try to zoom and mine the data and look at some of these indicators that we have put in the report. And we were more interested in to understand whether children over time, what type of violence that they've been experienced. And that's why we have titled the report, Children Exposed to Maltreatment.
I suppose knowing this helps us put plans into place, but in 1997, we already knew it was a problem, and that's why legislation was put into play. Does that mean either these statistics come out too far apart, or what is it? Because I would like to think if we knew that this was such a big problem and continues to be a big problem, our authorities would have taken action.
So I think that's the reason why from Statistics South Africa, we decided to dedicate a report that talks to children. Because in the past, we were just releasing statistics to say these are the number of individuals who have exposed to violence. But we have never have a dedicated product that looks at children. So I think to address the point that you are making is that now authorities and also people, my colleagues who are in the police space, in the policy space, they will be in a position now to have a dedicated product that they can actually use in trying to come up with intervention and also policy interventions.
I would imagine something like physical abuse is pretty straightforward in understanding that it's abuse. Verbal abuse is a difficult one, isn't it? Because I think sometimes a child doesn't realize actually he's being verbally abused.
Yes, maybe Peter, before I get to that point, maybe I just also bring context into, why we are so interested in looking at this child statistics. If you look at the population that we estimated in 2021, we were saying with South Africans, we have around 60.5 million South Africans. And if you look at in percentage, 34% of that population is actually children. So you're talking about 20.7 million children. So we wanted to understand, and have a dedicated, like I said, dedicated product that look at them and say, what are some of the challenges that children are facing almost on a daily basis? And as I said, we go to the household and we ask these questions from the household's point of view. So to your point, if you look at our statistics, we are looking at the period between 2009 and 2019, we've seen that over time, if you look at all sort of violence that children are exposed to, it actually have dropped from 18.2% to from 18% to 8.2%. However, when you look at the 2019, which is the current point that we're referring to, that's when now when you unbundle it and you look at it in terms of what type of violence, that's when now corporal punishment comes. And I think your statistics that you are displaying now on the screen, that's where the 84% comes in. And then to your point, to your question now, in terms of verbal, so verbal abuse, it's something that if you compare it over time, it's actually growing also. And what we have noticed is that it's not only verbal coming from the teachers, it's also verbal coming from the learners. So children are actually exposed to type of violence, both from the learners and also both from the teachers.
Statistics again also give us areas to look at closer that perhaps in the past not so magnified. What else has come up as a result of this study for you that you want to investigate further?
So what we also found is that the type of violence that children are exposed, it depends on the gender. So we have noticed that actually overall, girls are actually prone to be exposed to any sort of violence, whether at school or by teachers or by learners. But what we also found is that corporal punishment, it's more profound in the rural area than in the urban areas. The other part that we also found, Peter, is that we also found that when you break it down by primary school and secondary school, it's more prevalent in the primary school than in the secondary school. So about 70.8% children who are actually attending primary school are exposed to any sort of violence. And when you look at the verbal abuse, it's actually more profound in the urban areas. And girls are more likely to also be victims of this type of abuse. However, the physical abuse, it's mostly boys who are mostly likely to be part of to actually experience the physical abuse. So these are some of the findings that we have found from our data, as I said, and we were more specific to have a timeline from 2019 to 2019. This is before COVID. And the reason why we are looking at it before COVID is because, as you know, that in 2020, 2021, the schooling program was not the same because of COVID-19. So what's going to be interesting, to your point, whether what further interest that we want to explore is that in our next volume of volume 2, we want to track now post-COVID, whether are we still going to pick up this type of violence, but also look at other type of violence that we are not necessarily capturing it from the survey point of view. We are trying to see whether from the SABS point of view, whether what type of criminals, a crime that is being committed against children that is being reported from the SABS. And we'll try to see and, put it in the next report to also give a balanced view in terms of the crime that is being reported that is against children and also what is coming out also from the survey point of view.
I would imagine that in the modern era, there's a whole new layer, and that's happening online. So cyber attacks, cyberbullying, that must be, I guess, something on your radar going forward.
Yes. And I think the data itself is actually suggesting that also, because like I said, if you look at the verbal abuse, it's more prominent in the urban areas. And if you look at the penetration of the internet and also looking at the social media numbers, you'll see that our young ones are actually exposed to social media. So we are more interested to see whether, how social media also, push some of these percentages that we are seeing now. And in the next round, like I said, it will be more clear whether social media also it also playing a role in trying to also exposing this type of violence. And I think colleagues who are in the media space, you have been reporting on different incidents that is happening in the schools, and recording of this and putting them on the social media is being something that we have seen over time. So I think from our side, it's just to quantify it in terms of the numbers, just to give policymakers, some sort of, how big is this in terms from the number point of view.
All right. I know that Stats SA, you don't judge, you literally just present the numbers, but do you make recommendations at least?
So from our side, we work closely with the Department of Education, Social Development. So we provide numbers to them just to help them to understand it, and we workshop the numbers. But in terms of the recommendation, I think we allowed them to that space to take that decision, because it comes with some financial implication also. So from our end, we are not, I'm not clued up in terms of how to actually recommend the policy intervention, but I can only provide the numbers as raw as they are and assist my colleagues to understand them better.
All right. Well, thank you very much for helping us understand these figures tonight. Thanks for your time and for the work that you continue to do. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Peter.
Thank you. All right, that's Solly Molayi, who's the Stats SA Chief Director for Social Statistics. And it looks like, sadly, abuses against children continue in our schools, and girls in particular are more vulnerable to certain types of violence. Boys, physical violence, they're most vulnerable to as well. Stay with us, you're watching The Globe.